This is where we start with the extraordinary challenge that Jack Dorsey was facing around 2011. And you have to remember, he wasn't just the CEO of one massive high-profile company. He was running two completely distinct companies at the same time, Twitter and Square.
Which is, and it's hard to even wrap your head around. Most people can barely run one company effectively.
Barely. And these two companies, they demanded fundamentally different types of thinking.
Right. The context here is so critical. Twitter, back then especially, was living in this world of real-time outrage, breaking news cycles, constant outages. It was a high-frequency, totally reactive, short attention environment.
A fire hose of information. And then you have Square. Square was dealing with payments, compliance, physical logistics, merchants. A much more medium frequency, methodical, long-term regulatory world. You have to be precise. You have to be careful.
So each company needed a completely different mental posture, a different rhythm of decision-making. Trying to switch back and forth every hour between, say, which server is down right now and what is our 5-year payments roadmap.
Yeah.
It's cognitively impossible to do that well. You're just going to degrade your performance on both sides.
Absolutely. And the default solution for most leaders in that kind of situation, and frankly for many of you listening who juggle multiple big roles, is what our sources call heroic chaos.
Heroic chaos. I love that term. It sounds noble, but it's a trap.
It's a total trap. You bounce between inbox fires, urgent pings from executives, and those quick check-ins that somehow always metastasize into hour-long strategy sessions you weren't prepared for.
You feel incredibly responsive in the moment, like you're a hero putting out fires. But Dorsey realized that whole approach, it secretly just breaks your capacity for meaningful work. It turns it into, like, intellectual confetti.
And this is where his genius insight really lies. He recognized that the real cost of an interruption isn't the 2 or 3 minutes you spend solving that immediate problem or answering that Slack notification. It's the time and frankly, the massive mental energy required to completely reconstruct your context and get back to the deep work. Our sources have a great name for this. They call it reducing cognitive thrash.
Cognitive thrash.
Yeah.
That is a perfect phrase for it. Think of it like trying to drive a car with a manual transmission, and you're forced to shift from first gear directly into fifth and is immediately back to first every 5 minutes. The friction, the wear and tear, the lost momentum, it's constant. So
Yeah.
Dorsey's solution was it was incredibly elegant. He changed the unit of focus from the hour to the entire day.
Yes. He essentially treated his week like a series of training blocks, not like some disorganized buffet where you just grab whatever looks interesting. Each weekday was assigned a single dominant theme, and that theme acted as the day's primary operating frequency. It allowed his brain, and importantly the brains of the teams around him, to settle into a consistent rhythm.
Okay, so let's get specific. Let's detail the themes he used because they show these distinct high-level functions that a leader has to manage. But really, anyone can translate these into their own job hats.
Okay, so Monday was dedicated to management and running the company. So that's all the internal logistics, the one-on-ones, the detailed reviews you need to just keep the immediate operation humming along.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly. Then Tuesday was focused entirely on product. What are we building? What are the specs? Why are we prioritizing Project X over Project Y? All of that. Wednesday, he shifted gears completely to marketing, communications, and growth. So how do we tell our story? And how do we acquire more users or merchants?
So that's a much more external focus.
A very external focus. And Thursday continued that. It was dedicated to developers and partnerships, focusing on the whole ecosystem outside the company walls.
And crucially, Friday was reserved for culture and recruiting. I find that incredibly strategic. To reserve the end of the week for the foundational work that secures the future health and talent of the company, that's the stuff that so often gets neglected when people are just chasing immediate returns Monday through Thursday.
It's the long game thinking. And the sources confirm that even his weekends had defined roles: hiking, deep reflection, and strategy planning. This wasn't just passive downtime, it was block time, specifically for that macro-level trajectory setting, thinking that, it just can't happen when you're responding to alerts all day.
What's so fascinating about this system, and what makes it applicable to literally everyone listening, is that the theme acts as a simple, almost objective orientation device. The point wasn't that absolutely nothing else happened on a Tuesday. The world still barged in, I'm sure.
Of course.
But when a request tried to yank his attention sideways, let's say a major recruiting issue pops up on Tuesday, which is product day, he had a simple filter to run it through.
And that filter is what we can call the theme gate tactic. So instead of getting pulled into a discussion and having to debate the merit or the urgency of every single incoming request, You just route it using the theme. You ask yourself, what day is it? What kind of work is today for? So if it's Tuesday, product day, and someone asks for a deep dive on next quarter's marketing strategy, the default answer isn't yes or no, or let me see if I can squeeze it in. The default answer is defer to Wednesday.
That one move,
Yeah.
that structural pre-commitment, it reduces negotiation. It reduces the personal guilt you feel when you have to say no, and it prevents that random, endless game of calendar Tetris. Day theming is basically time blocking at the macro level. You're blocking identities for your days so your brain can stay in one gear long enough to achieve, like, escape velocity on meaningful projects.
And this applies so far beyond the CEO level. If you're a consultant, for instance, you might theme your days for client A, client B, and then internal strategy. If you're a creative professional, you might theme days for writing, for research, and then a day for administrative and sales work. The sources suggest picking 4 to 6 high-level job hats. These are roles, not tasks. Things like strategy, people development, sales and partnerships, or deep craft. The moment you define the day, you stop letting your schedule become a mirror of other people's random urgencies.
And if we look at the science here, that reduction in cognitive thrash is so powerful. Research from the American Psychological Association confirms that task switching is not free. There's a real cost. By theming your week, you're creating what you could call engineered return paths. When you switch away from Tuesday's product discussion to take a quick finance call, when you come back, you're returning to the same general mental landscape. You're still in product mode. That reduces the depth of that switch cost dramatically compared to switching from product to recruiting to marketing, all in the span of, say, 90 minutes.
You're making the mental switching cost pay off across a much wider block of time. It's just a huge psychological autonomy. You're trading dozens of small, very costly mental switches for maybe 3 or 4 large pre-planned ones spread across the week.
So if we agree that day theming works at the week level, we still have to figure out how to protect those themed days from getting just chopped up by meetings.
Yeah.
Which brings us perfectly to Paul Graham, the classic insight of the fundamental incompatibility of two very common work rhythms.
Yes, Paul Graham's experience running Y Combinator just perfectly crystallized this whole problem. On one hand, he needed to have these high-leverage conversations with founders, investors, partners. That's the manager side of his job. But on the other hand, he simultaneously needed deep, uninterrupted time for programming and for writing those famous essays. That's the maker side.
And that tension is the silent killer of productivity for so many of us. We're trying to operate as a manager for, say, 50% of the day and a maker for the other 50%, but the two schedules are just fundamentally incompatible. They're like oil and water.
Graham was the one who really clearly defined the difference. The manager's schedule lives in a world of 1-hour slots. Its goal, its whole purpose, is to optimize for availability and responsiveness. Meetings are just sprinkled throughout the day wherever there's an open space. But the maker's schedule, that needs long, uninterrupted stretches of time, at least a half day, ideally longer.
Right, to build those complex mental models, to get into cognitive flow, and to just work through a complex problem until it finally clicks. The maker's schedule optimizes for continuity.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really important for you, the listener, the fragmentation tax. Can you explain why, for a maker, a 30-minute meeting is not just 30 minutes lost?
Yeah, this is the key. Graham described the meeting as a wedge. For a manager, a meeting is just an appointment. You plug it in when there's a slot, no big deal. But for a maker, a single meeting splits the day into these structurally unusable fragments. Because deep work requires a significant mental warm-up. So if you have a key coding session or a writing session blocked from, say, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., and someone puts a mandatory 11:30 meeting right in the middle, the mental flow you needed to achieve to reach your peak insight is just, poof, it's reset by the switch cost.
And that's where so many of us get caught, right? We think, oh, it's fine, I'll just jump back in after the 30-minute meeting. But you can't just do deep work in the 47 minutes you have before that call because your brain subconsciously knows the meeting is coming. The block is ruined, structurally ruined. The tax isn't just the interruption itself, it's the potential loss of the 2 hours before it and the hour after it.
Absolutely. The manager optimizes for availability. The maker optimizes for continuity. The sources cite research showing that disruption has a meaningful resumption cost. You have to reconstruct where you were. You don't just pick up where you left off. And if a manager's schedule invades a maker's block, the maker pays a cognitive tax that's equivalent to maybe 3 or 4 times the duration of the meeting itself.
Now, I can hear someone listening thinking, okay, this sounds great for a programmer or a writer, but my job is mostly coordination. Maybe they're a team lead or a consultant whose job is genuinely 80% meetings. Doesn't adopting a full half-day maker block just make them inaccessible and, hurt the team?
That is a crucial, necessary point of friction. And the answer from Graham's system is nuanced. First, you have to identify what your true maker work actually is. If you're a team lead, your maker work might not be coding. It might be preparing the quarterly strategy document, or writing performance reviews, or synthesizing a week's worth of customer feedback. Those are high-leverage tasks that absolutely require continuity. And second, the solution isn't to eliminate meetings. It's to have contained meetings.
Contained meetings, so you're forcing them into a specific zone.
Exactly. Graham would cluster his appointments into specific, predictable windows. He called them office hours. And crucially, he often pushed these meetings to the end of the working day, from say 2 p.m. onwards. This ensured they never intersected with or corrupted that deep, high-value morning block.
So instead of letting meetings just take whatever hour they wanted between 9 and 5, they were forced into a specific container, a specific zone. That's what allows the rest of the calendar to remain usable for deep work. We can apply this by adopting the simple, structural 2-block day.
Yes. Block 1, the morning. Let's say 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. That is maker work. You are psychologically unavailable. You're focused on your highest leverage tasks. Block 2, the afternoon. That's for meetings, administration, email processing, all the reactive tasks. The goal is to avoid that checkerboard calendar where your deep work time is chopped into these tiny, unusable fragments. The goal isn't 0 meetings. The goal is structurally contained meetings.
The tactic here for you listening is to go into your calendar right now and block one uninterrupted half day next week, just one to start. Title it Maker Block. And then you have to treat it like a flight. You don't just move it a little. And that structural defense leads us perfectly from macro scheduling of the week and structural defense of the half day to the extreme defense of the mental environment itself.
Right. If we accept that constant interruption destroys complex, high-leverage work, then we have to talk about how to build a space where that work can actually survive. And this is something Bill Gates realized very early on in the 1990s as Microsoft was scaling into this global giant. The decisions became so complex and the demands on his time so constant that he knew he needed a fundamentally different state of mind to make them.
And that state just couldn't be achieved while he was answering the thousands of daily demands pouring into his office. It was impossible. The solution was the now legendary Think Week. Gates would isolate himself in a simple cabin, aggressively simple logistics on Washington's Hood Canal for 7 straight days. This is not a vacation. This was an extreme act of concentration.
He was there to concentrate, to read, to think, and to write about the future of computing. He said he only interacted with the person who dropped off his meals. And if this sounds extreme to you, just remember the scale of the decisions he was making. It was required.
And here's the most crucial detail, the one that defines the entire concept for us. It's the intentional omission. Gates was so committed to uninterrupted concentration that he wouldn't even check email or take phone calls.
Think about that. No inbox, no tiny dopamine drip from being needed or responsive. Just one mind, one protected room, one curated stack of material, and that uncomfortable silence where genuinely big, trajectory-changing ideas actually have room to fully form and show up.
This was never productivity theater. This was him scheduling a complete cognitive environment, a container that was structurally large enough for strategy, for invention, for market reinvention to occur without competition. Strategy cannot live in the leftover 15 minutes between meetings. It needs a fortress.
That insight right there. Some work can't live in leftovers. It needs a fortress, is what we all must translate. Most of us listening can't book a cabin for 7 days, I get that, but we all have work that is currently living in leftovers that requires this same fortress-level protection.
So we have to scale the altitude of the commitment. You don't have to start with a week. Start with a half-day think block once a month. Then maybe commit to one full off-grid day per quarter. The critical tactic here isn't just blocking the time. It is aggressively blocking the inputs. That means turning off the Slack notification, closing the email client, muting the phone, and committing to 0 response for the duration of the block, just like Gates did.
I wonder, though, about the psychological difficulty of disconnecting so completely. For 7 days, you must feel incredibly anxious about what you're missing. Doesn't that anxiety itself sabotage the thinking?
That is the entire point. The sources suggest that the commitment has to be so absolute that it bypasses the anxiety. By pre-committing to the environmental block, you eliminate the negotiation with yourself. The structure provides the psychological safety. Your job is defined for the next 6 hours. Read and write. It is not read and check email. The decision is already made.
And the content matters too. Gates had his curated stack of reading material. For you listening, you need a pre-selected handful of essential memos or articles or research papers. Too much material just becomes another form of avoidance or procrastination.
And always, always add a re-entry block the day after your think block. Dedicate 60 minutes to translating those insights into actionable calendar commitments, specific tasks, and follow-up meetings. Ideas that are developed in the fortress are absolutely useless if they stay trapped inside the cabin.
And to truly understand why this cognitive fortress is so necessary, we have to move past the anecdotes of CEOs and look at the hard science of task switching. The anecdotal experiences of Dorsey and Gates are completely validated by measurable, non-negotiable costs in our brains.
Yeah, the American Psychological Association's research on switch costs is incredibly clear on this. Switching between tasks is not free, and the price is paid in your time, your accuracy, and your mental energy.
So let's give those technical terms the depth they deserve. What exactly is happening in our brain when we try to switch rapidly between, say, writing a detailed report and then responding to a quick finance request?
Okay, so when you switch, your brain has to perform two sequential and really resource-intensive tasks. The first is goal shifting. This is the effort of consciously overriding your current objective, say, defining the plot of your novel, and replacing it with a completely new one, say, defining the budget for Q3. That requires executive function. It takes real effort.
So goal shifting is just the decision to stop doing task A and start doing task B.
Exactly. And the second and much more taxing step is rule activation. This means shutting down the cognitive rules and parameters for the previous task. So the mental software for creative writing and loading the entirely different set of rules for the new task, the mental software for numerical analysis, logic, and policy review.
And if you're constantly switching between highly dissimilar tasks like manager work and maker work, that combination of goal shifting and rule activation, it just demands enormous resources. It adds measurable time, it significantly increases your errors, and it requires a massive amount of mental effort, especially when the work involves complex logic, problem solving, or strategy.
And this leads us directly to the concept of resumption costs. Workplace research confirms that a disruption doesn't just cost you the time of the interruption itself, it costs you the time to mentally re-engage. People don't just go back to the deep work. They have to painstakingly reconstruct the context, remember the state of the problem, and recall what their next step was going to be.
So how much measurable time does this process actually cost?
Yeah.
I mean, even if we just give an estimate based on the research.
The research has consistently shown that after an interruption, it can take an average of 20 to 25 minutes to return to the original task, and often much longer to regain the same depth of focus or cognitive flow that you had before the interruption. So if your job involves complex thinking and you check Slack every 10 minutes, you are effectively paying a 20-minute tax for every 10 minutes of responsiveness.
That cognitive tax is it's devastating. If you're scheduling a writing block or a design block, you cannot afford to schedule it in 45-minute fragments. You have to defend the 3-hour block because that is barely enough time to warm up, reach flow, and then produce high-leverage work before the next major thing begins.
The tactical takeaway is to use a think block or a deep work block at the right altitude for you. But if you are blocking the time, you must explicitly block the inputs. And to maximize the block, write 3 fundamental questions at the top of your notes before you start. What are you trying to solve here? And then end the block by writing a 1-page summary to your future self. 1 decision you made, 1 experiment to run, 1 thing to stop doing. This enforces strategic outpoint, so the block pays its cognitive price only once.
If you want a different future, you have to block time where that future can be imagined. And you have to protect that time fiercely, which transitions us beautifully from protecting the half-day and the full week to protecting the specific moment of high-stakes performance itself.
Yeah, when we talk about time blocking, most people focus on scheduling their 9-to-5 knowledge work. But elite performers understand that true time blocking has to include the preparation necessary for peak performance. And we can turn now to LeBron James and his incredibly intense pre-game ritual, which is just a structural masterpiece.
James's ritual is famous for its sheer commitment. He arrives at the arena a massive 5 hours before tip-off. And when you first hear that, it sounds excessive, right? Maybe even a little superstitious. But you have to understand what those 5 hours are protecting against.
It's the definition of a defensive architecture. Those 5 hours are not social hour. He's not just wandering around. It's a remarkably linear, pre-committed sequence, like the checklist for prepping a space launch. There is zero improvisation.
Let's detail that sequence because it's a perfect example of compartmentalizing your preparation.
Okay, so the sequence begins in the weight room. Then it moves meticulously to the on-court workout. Then comes the crucial, really unglamorous part. Bodywork, recovery, compression, and dedicated ice time. Only after the physical stack is meticulously managed does he shift to the mental stack. Scouting reports, matchup study, and finally the team meeting. And all of this is interwoven with a precisely timed meal and specific snacks to regulate his energy.
The insight here is that the amateur approach to high-stakes work is believing that motivation and readiness will just magically appear on demand when the whistle blows. James understands that readiness is manufactured. It's built through this linear, repeatable structure.
The enemy of performance isn't just the opponent. It's friction and uncertainty. A slightly late arrival, a surprise media obligation, a minor muscle tweak. If your schedule is packed tight, every one of those surprises becomes a threat that can collapse your focus. Those 5 hours buy him margin. So when James says his time has no fat, no feff around time, he's describing an architecture of readiness where each block funnels toward one outcome, arriving at tip-off already physiologically and mentally calibrated.
So the hinge moment here is that most of us, we time block the work itself, the meeting, the presentation, the creative session, and we completely forget to time block the non-negotiable preparation that actually makes the work possible.
Yes. A runway is a pre-committed sequence of blocks that removes improvisation from high-stakes moments. We need to translate his 5 hours into something actionable for us. So if you have a major sales call, a key presentation, or a difficult conversation, the real win is in the sequencing. Prepare the body and brain, do the work, and then recover and review.
And we have to emphasize that the principle is sequencing, not duration. Most of us can't block 5 hours, so let's be ruthless. If you only have 30 minutes to prepare for a major presentation, what are the 3 specific micro blocks that are non-negotiable?
The practical application here is to create a 3-block runway for any high-stakes event. Block 1, prime. That's 10 to 30 minutes of dedicated preparation, review of notes, mental visualization. Block 2, perform, the event itself. And block 3, process, a 10 to 20-minute review and teardown capturing what worked and what didn't. You have to standardize the sequence, add transition blocks as first-class calendar items, setup, warm-up, teardown.
And use that no-fat filter during your runway. Ban low-value inputs like checking Slack or your inbox. You are calibrating. You are not distracting yourself. If it matters, give it a runway. Great work starts before it starts. But performance isn't just about a single game. It's about the consistency of the cycle, which brings us to Michael Phelps.
The structure provided by Phelps's longtime coach, Bob Bowman, is the ultimate testament to this idea that predictable results demand predictable structure, independent of mood or motivation.
This is so critical. The reliance on motivation, or feeling it, is the great amateur trap in every single discipline. Bowman was selling relentless structure, not a burst of inspiration.
His training schedule was intentionally unromantic and absolutely rigid. A 2-hour swim workout in the morning and another 2-hour swim workout in the afternoon, plus 4 dryland sessions a week, sometimes 5. This is a constant crushing cycle repeated day after day until the fundamentals, the strokes, the turns, the endurance become completely automatic under extreme competitive pressure.
And the scheduling philosophy behind all this volume is captured in Bowman's quote. You should see a little bit of progress every day. If progress is the non-negotiable requirement, then your calendar must be designed to make progress likely, regardless of how Phelps felt when he woke up. The blocks protect the daily progression.
And the power of the cycle is that it reduces the number of daily decisions you have to make. The morning swim is not a debate. The afternoon swim is not a debate. This is the application of implementation intentions on a weekly scale. I do this at 7 a.m. will reliably beat I do this when I feel motivated every single time.
Let's break down that behavioral science connection, because these implementation intentions are really key to successful time blocking.
Yeah, an implementation intention is basically just if-then planning. Meta-analytic research confirms that specifying when, where, and how you'll perform an action reliably increases your follow-through and goal achievement. You're creating an automatic link in your brain. If it is 7:40 a.m., then I am in the pool. This bypasses the need to use your finite mental willpower or executive function in the moment, which might be drained by daily stressors. You've pre-decided your commitment.
So the logic of the cycle is about reducing the cognitive load on the athlete or on the worker. The system dictates the action, not your mood.
Exactly. And we can apply this logic to knowledge work. You don't need Phelps's volume, but you need his logic. Build a 2-session day for your most important work. One deep block in the morning where you leverage your peak mental energy, and then a shorter session later for a review, revision, or supporting practice.
And we have to incorporate that dry land concept. For knowledge workers, dry land is the essential supporting practice that isn't the core deliverable. So that could be reading industry journals, practicing with new software templates, cleaning up your systems, organizing your files, or any kind of skills training.
Bowman prescribed 4 to 5 dry land sessions a week. We can schedule 4 to 5 hours of supporting, systematizing, and cleaning work weekly. And if you do this consistently when you get to your deep work block, you don't waste 30 minutes organizing documents or searching for the right template because you've already paid that dry land tax.
The key is the feedback loop. End every day. Not with some vague sense of completion, but with Bowman's test. What measurable progress moved forward today? If you can't answer that, adjust tomorrow's blocks, not your character. Don't time block for hero days. Time block for repeatable progress that makes success inevitable. And this constant structured progression brings us to our final foundational section, which connects all this structure back to fundamental intent.
We've talked about modern CEOs and 21st century athletes, but this need to structure attention, it's timeless. Benjamin Franklin, working in the churn of 18th century Philadelphia commerce, understood that without structure, ambition just turns into anxious improvisation. He decided he had to fight for the right to allocate his own attention.
He documented this struggle in his autobiography, formulating what he called the precept of order, this powerful idea that every part of his business and his life should have its allotted time. This was not some vague organization system. This was a literal, meticulously time-blocked structure he called his scheme of employment.
And we can detail this daily structure because it survives as a fantastic template even today. It started with rising early and planning the day, which was followed by blocks for serious foundational work. There was a dedicated midday block, and this is critical, to or review accounts, which served as a check on reality and commerce. More work followed in the afternoon, and then an evening block was reserved for conversation, music, putting things in place, and finally, the examination of the day.
That sounds incredibly disciplined. But the most important detail Franklin included, the thing that makes this so relevant today, is his reality check. He admitted that the plan was brutally hard to execute perfectly, especially when he had to mix with the world and receive people at their own hours.
This is the critical context. Even the father of American productivity was battling fragmentation 3 centuries ago. The world interrupted, it intruded, it rescheduled. But Franklin's genius wasn't that he executed the plan flawlessly. It was that his response wasn't to abandon the idea of allotment. It was to keep returning day after day to the structure. He knew the structure was a compass, not a contract.
And that provides immense comfort to us today, doesn't it? Even a figure synonymous with efficiency struggled with the friction of external demands. But his response was always directed by a core principle. And it wasn't the task list. It was the question he asked himself.
That's right. Franklin didn't begin his day with a task list. He began with a question that enforced intent. He had a morning question and an evening question, and they served as the philosophical steering wheel for his entire day.
The morning question, what good shall I do this day?
Yeah.
This is intent setting. It forces a decision on what is the highest value before all the chaos and urgency of the day begins.
And then the evening question, what good have I done today? This is the reckoning. The feedback loop, the objective measurement of value created.
This is the crucial anchor. A blocked day without a question is just a packed calendar. It's just a list of tasks waiting to fail. The question creates intention. It forces immediate prioritization, because if something must be good, then something else must, by definition, not fit. And it reliably builds a feedback loop for adjustment.
This is time blocking with a moral and strategic backbone. It ensures you don't merely schedule hours, but that you schedule a day that answers a question you actually care about. And if we connect this back to Dorsey and Graham, the structure, the day theme, the maker block, that's the mechanism for answering Franklin's morning question.
So how do we apply Franklin's wisdom today? We have to update his scheme for our hyper-connected reality.
Well, first, you adopt the 2 questions. Maybe you modernize them a bit. What would make today feel meaningful at 9 p.m. or coup? If I only achieve one thing today, what must it be? Then, block your day in 3 to 5 large chunks, not 20 microslots. Franklin used big sections, and that structural size survives reality much better.
And I think his midday block for reviewing accounts is highly relevant. We can translate that into a non-negotiable accounts block, 20 to 40 minutes midday to review your open loops, clear the essential messages, process the administrative detritus, and tie up the loose ends that could otherwise distract you during your afternoon deep block. You're giving your reactive mind a contained window to breathe.
And crucially, you use the evening reset block, what Franklin called his examination of the day. End your workday with 10 to 15 minutes to clear your desk, capture any loose thoughts, and most importantly, set the first block for tomorrow. That commitment is what ensures the cycle begins successfully and predictably again.
The final realization from Franklin is this. If you don't anchor your blocked time to intent, you're just busy. Ask the question first, then allot the time.
And this really brings all of our concepts together, creating a unified system from the macro structure all the way down to the minute-by-minute performance sequence.
So we've taken a comprehensive deep dive here, extracting the core principles used by some of the highest leverage performers across history and industry. And I think it's time to summarize how these three levels of protection can fit together for you.
We really built the system from the ground up, starting with the biggest possible defense and working our way in.
On the macro level, we learn to theme the week like Jack Dorsey. The goal is to reduce the punishing cost of cognitive thrash. And we learn to fiercely defend the half-day like Paul Graham, to fight that fragmentation tax imposed by the manager's schedule. You have to optimize for continuity over immediate availability.
Then, on the micro level, we learn to build the runway like LeBron James, pre-committing that structured sequence that's necessary for high-stakes performance. And to protect the cycle like Michael Phelps, ensuring that repeatable, intentional structure makes daily progress inevitable, independent of how you happen to feel that morning.
And finally, the foundation that anchors it all, purpose. You have to connect your time to a meaningful intent using Benjamin Franklin's two powerful questions.
The takeaway here at the end of the day is that time blocking is not some rigid discipline meant to crush your spontaneity or make you feel guilty when you deviate. It is the fundamental, highest leverage defensive strategy you possess. It is the only way to ensure your calendar reflects your priorities, your strategy, and your desired progress, rather than simply being a passive dumping ground for everyone else's urgencies and demands.
And here's where it gets interesting. The final provocative thought we want to leave you with, which synthesizes the lessons of consistency and intent. The goal of all this structure isn't to achieve one heroic 18-hour day of work where you prove your worth. The goal is to set up a sustainable, defensive system for repeatable progress that consistently answers that fundamental question.
Don't time block for hero days, time block for the predictable, repeatable progress that allows you to confidently answer the question every evening. What good have I done today? So take one action right now. Block one runway for something important this week. Defend one half day. And start designing your own cognitive fortress.